Wyoming Territory, May of 1877, the wind howled over the empty plains as Helena Prescott buried her husband under a sky that refused to cry for her. She stood in her black dress, arms wrapped around her chest, trying to keep the weight of the world from crushing her where she stood. Her belly heavy with children strained against the fabric. The preacher mumbled words she could barely hear. Her husband's coffin lowered into the dirt while her heart went with it. By sundown, she was a widow. By sunrise, she was a mother. The twins came early. The pain hit sharp and sudden in the middle of the night, and with no midwife to call and only her husband's bitter-tempered sister to help, the girls were born screaming into a house that no longer wanted them. She named them Hope and Hazel. Helena looked at their tiny faces, all pink skin and gasping mouths, and felt something inside her crack wide open. Love poured through the break, but her in-laws did not see love. They saw burden. "You brought this on yourself," her mother-in-law hissed from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed tight. "Twins, that is no blessing, it is a curse. We buried one son already, we will not raise his bastards too." Helena blinked, stunned. "They are his daughters, they are all I have left of him." "You have nothing," her sister-in-law snapped. "He is dead. This is our house, you can leave or be dragged out." She left. The snow had long melted, but the air still bit as Helena wrapped her babies in a threadbare shawl and stepped onto the road. No wagon, no food. Just a satchel with a jar of milk, 2 cloth diapers, and a letter from her husband that she could not bear to read again. She walked until her feet bled, stopping only when the babies fussed. She sang to them through cracked lips, kept them warm with her body, and whispered promises she was not sure she could keep. By the 3rd day, the milk had turned sour. She had not eaten since the morning she gave birth. The world narrowed into noise and ache and cold. She collapsed just outside the edge of a cattle ranch, somewhere south of Laramie. A man found her. He had a rifle slung over one shoulder and a streak of silver in his dark hair. His name was Hollis Langford, and he had not expected to find a woman half dead in his pasture with 2 crying babies pressed against her chest. He knelt beside her. "Ma'am, hey, can you hear me?" Her lips moved, but no sound came. She tried to lift Hazel, who had gone quiet. Panic surged in her blood, but her arms would not move. "Easy," Holly said, already lifting the babies with surprising gentleness. "I got them. You just hold on." He carried them all back to the house, Helena, Hope, and Hazel, and laid them down beside a warm stove. His voice was calm as he spoke, even while pouring goat's milk into a bottle and checking the baby's skin. Helena woke a day later to the scent of coffee and the sound of someone chopping wood. She tried to sit up and cried out from the pain. Holly's came in fast. "You should stay down." She stared at him. "The girls, they are fine," he said, voice quiet. "I fed them, changed them too, not the first time I have done that." "Why would you help us?" He hesitated. "Because someone should have." She watched him. He looked worn down in the way only loss could do, like he had been left behind too many times and stopped expecting anything to stay. But his hands were steady and his voice had kindness in it. "Are you alone?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "My wife died 3 years ago. Our boy, Harrison, is 10. He is out in the barn helping with the foals." Helena's throat tightened. "I have nothing, no home, no family." "You have them," Holly said, nodding toward the cradle where the girls slept curled against each other. She looked at her daughters, the only proof she had that love had ever existed in her life. "I do not even know where to go," she whispered. "You do not have to go anywhere," he said. "Not unless you want to." Helena blinked at him. "You cannot mean that." "I have room," he said. "And Harrison has been lonely too long. I could use the help with things. It is not charity, it is just 2 people helping each other survive." She stared at him for a long moment. Her heart, bruised and hollow, beat just a little harder. "All right," she said. Days passed, then weeks. Harrison was shy at first, but Helena noticed how he lingered near the cradle, how he held Hope with careful arms and made Hazel giggle with silly faces. He reminded her so much of her husband, quiet, good-hearted, steady. Holly's was the same. He fixed a rocking chair for her. Built a proper cradle. He never spoke of what he lost, but she caught him now and then watching the girls with a look that was almost reverent, like he could not believe something so small still existed in this world. Helena helped where she could, mending shirts, baking, helping Harrison with his reading. She breastfed the girls when her milk returned, and she began to smile again, not as a habit but as something real. One evening, she stood on the porch, watching the sun spill gold across the fields. Hollis came up beside her, gently holding her shawl out. "Cool night," he said. "Yes," she said, taking it. Their fingers brushed. They stood in silence for a while, just watching the horizon. "You saved me," she said finally. He looked at her. "You saved yourself. You just needed someone to see it." She turned to him, her heart thudding. "You let me stay when no one else would," he swallowed, voice low. "I think I needed you to stay more than I realized." The girls cried then, and she moved to go inside, but he caught her hand. "Helena," he said. She froze. "I do not want you to feel like you owe me anything, but if you ever wanted to stay for more than just shelter, I would like that." Her chest tightened, not from fear, but from the unfamiliar warmth of hope. She leaned forward just a little, her breath catching. "I do not want to go anywhere," she said. He smiled. "A real one." And for the first time since her husband died, she felt something like joy stir in her chest. She had come to this house with nothing, but maybe, just maybe, she had found everything. Helena shifted Hazel to her other shoulder, gently patting her back as dusk settled into the folds of the land. The scent of warm cornmeal and browned salt pork drifted from the kitchen window behind her, and Harrison's laughter echoed faintly from the barn. Hope had just fallen asleep in the cradle, her tiny mouth slack with milk-drunk sleep. Helena didn't dare move too quickly lest she wake again. Inside, Hollis was bent over the stove, stirring with a steady hand, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked up when she came in. "She settle?" he asked. "For now," Helena said. "Hazel's still fighting it." "She's got lungs like a calf in spring," Hollis said, not unkindly. He reached for the skillet's handle, then paused. "You want to try feeding Harrison tonight? He's been asking after your biscuits. I didn't know he liked them. He sets one aside every time, wraps it in a cloth and saves it for later. Doesn't do that with mine." Helena smiled, almost shyly. "Then I suppose I should make a fresh batch tomorrow?" Hollis didn't answer right away. She caught the way he looked at her, quiet, thoughtful, not expectant but aware. As if he was noticing the shape she made in his home and wondering if it might stay. They ate on the porch, plates resting on their knees. Harrison joined them after washing up, cheeks still red from the wind outside. "You should have seen the sorrel colt," he said around a mouthful of beans. "He kicked the fence so hard I thought he'd break his leg." Helena raised a brow. "Did he hurt himself?" "No, ma'am, just mad he couldn't reach the oats. I moved him higher like Pa said." "Smart thinking," she said, and Harrison beamed. Later, while she laid the girls down for the night, Hollis lingered just outside the doorway, arms crossed lightly as he watched her smooth a blanket over Hope's feet. "You've a way with them," he said. "I'm still learning it," Helena murmured. "Some days I think I'll never catch up." "You're doing just fine." She turned. Hollis had stepped closer without meaning to, his hand resting against the doorframe. The lamplight caught the lines that bracketed his eyes, but it softened him too. "I never expected to share my home again," he said quietly. "Not in this way." "I never expected kindness to find me again," Helena replied. They stood in the hush of the room for a long moment. Hazel stirred, and Helena leaned to adjust her position. When she straightened again, Hollis had stepped back. "I'm heading out to check the gate," he said. "Storm blew through last week. Might have loosened that south latch. I'll keep the fire going," she said. He nodded once, pulled on his coat, and slipped out into the night. The wind rose not long after, curling around the eaves of the house. Helena sat at the table, patching one of Harrison's shirts by lamplight. She listened to the creak of the windmill and the distant rustle of the cottonwoods. It was a lonely sound, but not an empty one. She finished the mending, folded the shirt, and carried it to Harrison's room. The boy was already asleep, one arm slung over his eyes, the other curled around a worn wooden horse. Helena paused, heart catching. She'd tucked in her girls 100 times, but this was the first time she'd done it for him. She left the folded shirt on the chair and pulled the quilt higher over his shoulder. Back in the kitchen, she stoked the fire, fed it a fresh log, and sat again. Hollis didn't return right away. When the door finally opened, he brought in the scent of earth and pine with him, his coat damp from dew. "Fence held," he said. "Just needed an extra nail." Helena rose, took the kettle from the stove, and poured him a tin cup. "You're soaked through." He accepted the drink, eyes lingering on her face. "Didn't expect you to wait up. I couldn't sleep." He took a sip, then set the cup down. "You thinking of leaving?" "No," she said, and then, softer, "I think I've done enough running." He stepped closer. "You don't owe me anything." "I know," she met his eyes, "but I still want to stay." The warmth that came into his face wasn't sudden, it was slow, like dawn breaking over the hills, quiet and sure. "Then we'll make it work," he said. She nodded once, her throat thick. The girls stirred again, and she turned to go to them. As she passed him, Hollis reached out and gently touched her wrist. "You don't have to do everything alone anymore," he said. Her breath caught, but she didn't look away. "You either." He let his hand fall, but the space between them felt different now, less like a line and more like a bridge. In the quiet under that roof, something steady and unspoken began to root itself. Not just survival, but the beginning of belonging. The first frost came early that year. Hollis found it clinging to the fence rails like lace, delicate and final. He carried in a load of hickory before dawn, boots leaving clean prints on the hard ground. Inside, Helena was already at the hearth, feeding Hazel under a quilt, her hair still loose from sleep. "You didn't have to be up yet," he said, voice low. "There's never enough hours with two mouths to fill," she said, glancing over at Hope, who was gnawing one fist from her place on a folded blanket. "Let me take her," Hollis offered, crouching beside her. Hope reached for his collar with a soft grunt, and he lifted her easily, settling her against his chest. "She's getting heavier." "She's greedy," Helena teased. "Takes after her sister." He looked down at the girl, blinking up at him, her small hand curled tight in the wool of his shirt. "They're strong, both of them." Helena shifted Hazel to her shoulder and reached for the tin cup beside her. "I'm not sure I expected to still be standing by now." "You're doing more than standing," Hollis said. "You're keeping them fed, keeping the house in one piece. You've taken to this place like it was always yours." She looked up then, eyes meeting his. "I wasn't sure I'd ever belong anywhere again." "You do now." He didn't say more, and she didn't need him to. The stove crackled behind them, and the girls breathed softly, and the silence between them had turned into something settled and whole. Later that morning, Harrison came in with a split lip and dirt on his shirt. "What happened?" Helena asked, setting aside the carrots she'd been chopping. "Tripped on the creek bed," he muttered, brushing at his knees. Hollis knelt in front of him. "That's not the truth." Harrison's mouth pressed into a line, eyes flicking toward the window. "Who was it?" Hollis asked. "Benton Rawls and his cousin," Harrison admitted. "Said I was living with bastards now. Said Mama wouldn't have let it happen." The air in the room shifted, sharp and still. Helena moved slow, wiping her hands on a cloth. "Doesn't matter what they say, they don't know you or me." "They said I don't have a real family anymore." Hollis stood. "You've got more family now than most boys ever get." Harrison's chin trembled, but he crossed his arms tight and nodded once. That evening, Helena found him in the barn, brushing the sorrel colt with uneven strokes. She leaned against the stall door. "I know what it's like," she said. "To hear words that feel like they take something from you." He didn't look at her, but his grip loosened on the brush. "When I was cast out, I thought it meant I was less, that I'd failed somehow, but I hadn't. And neither have you. They said my mama wouldn't have wanted this. Your mama wanted you safe, wanted you loved, that's what this is." He swallowed hard, then nodded. "I like when you make biscuits, I'll make more tomorrow." He smiled, just a flash, then turned back to the colt. That night, after both girls were asleep and the house had gone quiet, Helena brought Hollis a mug of chicory and sat beside him near the fire. The wind rattled the shutters, but inside it was warm. "You ever think about leaving this place?" she asked. "Once," he said. "Right after she passed." Everything felt too big, Too empty, but I had Harrison. He's always needed something solid under his feet. She traced the rim of her mug with one finger. Would you ever marry again? He looked over at her, eyes steady. I would, if it was the right person. And if it was what she wanted too. She didn't speak right away. The firelight threw gold across his jaw, made his features look softer than they were. I never thought I'd want to again, she said. But lately I find myself thinking about how things might look years from now. He nodded once. So do I. They didn't say more. They didn't need to. In the stillness, something shifted again, quiet and certain, like roots deepening into earth. It was not a declaration. It was not a promise. But it was beginning, and it felt like peace. Snow clung to the ridge above the barn, pale against the dark timberline. Morning had come quiet and cold, the kind that stiffened the hinges of the gate and made the horses stomp for warmth. Helena stood at the window, Hazel tucked against her hip, watching Hollis and Harrison drive the cattle up from the creek bed. The older cows moved slow, hooves sinking through the fresh crust, but the smaller heifers darted ahead, breath steaming in the air. Is that rawhide on his gloves? She asked, turning slightly as Harrison passed through the gate, swinging it shut with practiced ease. He split the old reins to make them, Hollis said from behind her. Didn't want to waste good leather. He's clever, she murmured. So are you, Hollis said. I saw the way you fixed that saddlebag yesterday. Never seen a stitch hold like that. She shifted Hazel to her other arm and glanced at him, surprised. I didn't think you noticed. I notice everything you touch, he said, quiet but without hesitation. She didn't answer. Instead, she bent and kissed Hazel's head, then set her gently in the cradle beside her sister. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing snow from the roof in soft falls. At noon, Hollis returned with a cracked lip and a raw scrape on one knuckle. What happened? Helena asked, reaching for a clean rag. Fence post slipped, he said. Bucked back when I tried to brace it. You need that cleaned. Sit down. She dipped the cloth in warm water, then knelt beside him at the table. He didn't flinch as she dabbed the blood away, but his eyes stayed on her face. I've been thinking, he said, about. There's a parcel east of the creek, flat ground, bit of shelter from the cottonwoods. Thought it might be a good place for a second house. A second house, for you, he paused. For us, her hands stilled over his. Warmth bloomed where her knees touched the floorboards. I never asked for land, she said carefully, I know, but I've seen the way you carry this house. You ought to have one of your own to shape. She sat back a little. Would you live in it, if you'd have me? The room felt suddenly too still, the only sound the soft ticking of the mantel clock. You're not just offering me roof and timber, she said, voice low. No, he said. I'm asking if you want to build something with me. She rose slowly, her fingers brushing the back of his hand. I'd need a proper stove, one that draws even, he smiled, faint and real. I'll saw the stone myself. She turned toward the kitchen, but her footsteps had changed. They carried something forward now, something steady. That evening she sat with Harrison while he copied figures into a ledger. Snow fell harder, hushing the world outside. Hope stirred once but settled again when Helena laid a hand on her back. You ever think about learning your letters properly? Harrison asked, not looking up. I can read most things, Helena said. Writing's harder. I could teach you. She looked at him, surprised. You do that. You help me with everything, he said. Seems fair, she nodded. Then I'll try. When she cleared the supper plates, she found Hollis outside, patching a split in the porch rail. You don't rest much, she said. I've had too many winters where I did nothing but wait, he answered. Feels good to build again. She stepped down beside him, the cold biting through the soles of her boots. I meant what I said earlier, she told him. If we do this, I want it to be together. Not me tucked in some corner. I wouldn't ask you to be less than equal. She touched the back of his hand where the skin was rough and warm. Then we'll make our home where the cottonwoods break the wind. I'll help raise the walls. And I'll make sure the roof never leaks, he said. They stood there as the snow thickened, the porch lamplight throwing long shadows behind them. Helena didn't speak again, but she didn't need to. Her hand stayed in his, and for the first time in what felt like lifetimes, she didn't feel like she was waiting to be cast out. She felt anchored. Inside, Hazel sighed in her sleep. Hope shifted beside her. Harrison turned a page, and outside, under a sky soft with snow, two people stood side by side, no longer surviving but beginning. The thaw came slow that March, but it came. By the time the cottonwoods along the creek began to bud, the outline of the new house had taken shape. Helena stood beside Hollis near the freshly set foundation stones. Hazel tied to her hip with a length of muslin, and Hope balanced on her other arm. Harrison leaned against a wheelbarrow nearby, watching as Hollis drove the last corner stake into the softening earth. "I didn't know the land would feel different when it was ours," Helena said. Hollis looked up from the stake, his eyes squinting against the morning sun. "It always does once you choose to stay." Harrison nudged a flat rock with his boot. "Can I help lay the floorboards when it's time?" "You'll be the first to, son," Hollis answered, brushing the dirt from his palms. "You've earned that much." Helena's arms ached from holding both girls, but she didn't shift them. They were heavier now, heads strong, eyes alert. They'd begun teething, and Hazel had taken to biting the edge of her sister's blanket when she thought no one was looking. "I want the hearth to face south," Helena said. "So the light stretches long across the floor in winter," Hollis nodded. "We'll set it that way." "And a root cellar," she added, "dry with stone walls. I'll dig it myself." Harrison tilted his head. "Should we plant squash again this year?" "We'll need to," Helena said. "These two are going to eat us out of the pantry before they're walking." That night, while the girls slept curled together in the cradle Hollis had built, Helena carried a bowl of warm water to the table and set it beside his chair. "You've got pitch on your hands," she said. "Let me help." He held still while she dipped the cloth, then gently rubbed the sap from his knuckles and palms. His skin was rougher now, the kind that spoke of long days and honest work, but she knew the strength in his hands wasn't just in the muscle. It was in how he held her children, how he'd built them a life one plank at a time. "You remember what you said?" she asked, wringing out the cloth. "About what?" "About building only if I wanted to." His gaze met hers, steady. "I remember." She reached for his hand again, drying it carefully. "I want to, not just the house, I want all of it. You, Harrison, this." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he set his other hand over hers, not to stop her, but to keep it there. "I asked a circuit preacher out of Elkhorn to stop by next week," he said. "He'll be headed to Rawlins after. I figured if you still wanted we could make it official then." Helena let out a soft breath. "You waited until I said it first." "I didn't want to take your choice from you." Her eyes warmed. "You never have." The girls stirred, and she turned toward the cradle, but before she could move, Hollis stood and crossed the room ahead of her. He lifted Hope with practiced ease, settling her against his chest, then reached for Hazel. "I've got them," he said. She watched him rock the girls gently, his voice low as he hummed some tune she didn't recognize. The firelight caught the silver in his hair and turned it to gold. They were married the next Thursday, just as the first crocuses pushed up through the thawed patch by the well. Harrison wore a shirt Helena had stitched from old flour sacks, and Hollis had shaved for the first time in weeks. They stood under the cottonwoods, the preacher's voice solemn and low, the girls bundled in their arms. Afterward, Helena took off her shawl and spread it in the grass. Harrison brought bread and dried cherries. They broke it together, laughing when Hope tried to gum a crust and Hazel reached for Hollis's beard. That evening, alone again except for the hush of the prairie, Helena and Hollis sat in the doorway of the old house, legs stretched out, the girls asleep behind them. "You ever think about what might have happened if I hadn't collapsed near your pasture?" she asked. "I do," he said. "And then I stop, because it didn't happen that way." She leaned into his shoulder. "I think I was always meant to find this place." He rested his cheek against her hair. "Then I'm glad you got lost when you did." The wind moved soft across the grass. Behind them, the cradle creaked as one of the girls shifted. Harrison's even breathing drifted down the narrow hallway. The stars were just beginning to show. They didn't speak again that night. They didn't need to. The quiet between them was full of every word they hadn't said, and every promise they already kept. Years later, the house by the cottonwoods stood tall and solid, the hearth warm even in the deepest cold. Helena's herbs lined the kitchen wall, and Hollis's tools hung in a neat row by the barn. The girls grew straight and strong, full of questions, full of light. Harrison built a forge across the pasture and took to iron like he was born to it. But always, in every room, in every season, the home held the shape of two people who had come to each other not through chance, but through choice. And they never let go.